All right, looks like we're live. What's going on, everybody? So, we're going to start the stream off with a breakdown of the interaction I had with Dr. Michael Greger at the 2023 Planted Expo. If you haven't seen it, just the other day, I met Greger in person in Toronto after he did his speech on stage, and it was something else. So I have a lot of disagreements with Dr. Michael Greger. He does put out a fair bit of misleading information. One of my biggest grievances with him is with his idea that you can reverse heart disease with a plant-based diet alone. Now, going into this interaction that I had with him, I knew it wasn't a good idea to argue on that point, just because I've seen his response before. It's a very kind of heady, nuanced topic, and just the setting I didn't think was right for it, so decided to just debate him on erythritol, because it's a little more simple, straightforward, and I know it was something that he recently changed his position on. He used to encourage the use of erythritol. Now, because of the recent paper that was published, he says avoid it. And Dr. Avi is here with me in Discord, and we're going to go through that right now.
Yeah.
So
let me just say just at the outset, because I noticed one type of response that these things keep getting. If there's one type of response to not give a community trying to self-correct, probably one of the most disgusting responses is to say something like, well, he might have gotten this wrong, but look at how much good he's done. Don't you see how much good he's done for the vegan community? Maybe he gets this right or wrong. By the way, I don't agree with that. I think he stretches the envelope of science all the time. But even if he didn't, it would still be a disgusting response, because that's the type of response that prevents communities from doing exactly what we're trying to do, which is self-correct and hold ourselves accountable. So with that, that's just, I had to say that because that's just one type of response I see vegans making to this, and it's probably one of the cringiest responses I can ever see. So with that, let's get into the debate. We're going to review it point by point. We're going to get into the paper that was being discussed. Yeah, let's do it.
all right.
Hey, howdy-ho!
Oh, wait, shit. I should probably screen share with you, right?
Yeah. Screen share the video.
All right, you can see that?
Yep.
Okay.
Hey, howdy-ho!
I wanted to talk to you about erythritol.
Oh, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, so my understanding is you think it's related.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you're wrong.
Okay,
So the erythritol study that came in,
yeah.
it wasn't looking at intake, it was looking at serum concentrations.
No, it wasn't. So, you're right. So, and I talk about all the epidemiological factors, which dates back before it was even a sweetener on the market. So, obviously, it wasn't
He could be odd, but let's focus on the things he's saying.
Yeah.
The things he's saying.
all endogenous. And so, in fact, I did video. Did you see my video about it? I did video. Just trashing all those studies. But then they did the interventional study. They found that you can get up levels that actually cause that clotting. That's the problem.
Okay, you're
Okay,
talking
let's pause right there. So he's highlighting the different parts of the paper right now. So the Nature paper that came out on erythritol had several different components. One was an epidemiological component. And he doesn't seem to be agreeing with that part. Fine. But then he's saying they did interventional. That interventional part he's talking about is the mechanistic part of the study. Now, we're going to go over that mechanistic part of the study because I think he not only relies on mechanistic studies, but misrepresents them. Because I don't think it's fair to just say that they did an interventional study, and in that mechanistic study, they found erythritol caused clotting. That's not fair to say, but we'll get into why.
Yeah, please do
that
that.
option. And that was looking at intake?
So it was a threefold study, right? So there's an animal component, there's a human component, and then the epidemiology. And I agree, epidemiology is crap. I mean, in that particular sense, observational evidence can't do it because it wasn't even sweetener data, right? It was beforehand. It's amazing. So I did a video about that. But yeah.
Now, so far, everything he's saying is correct, by the way. So far, like, everything about the paper that he's saying is, yes, he's categorizing the paper appropriately, he's breaking down the different parts of it, and he's saying what he disagrees with, what he agrees with. Okay, fine. That's all fine.
Really just like, oh, shit.
Okay, so you're telling me with the intervention study they were able to induce clotting?
So they were able to raise the levels of erythritol in their blood to the level which clotted in vitro. And
Okay,
in vivo,
well,
too.
in vitro.
See, that's misleading, and we'll get into why. That's
In vivo, you can actually induce clotting.
Yeah.
Okay, in what?
Did you read that study?
In an animal model?
No, they did have an animal model, so that was their in vivo, and they also did an in vitro where they just took human blood and showed the increased clotting at the level of concentration. And they took volunteers, had them and measured how much erythritol was in their blood, and found that you can reach those levels that cause the clotting in human blood. That's not good.
Sure. The problem, though, is in the epidemiological study, they didn't actually look at it.
That's what I told you. That's exactly what my whole video was about.
Well, right, but
all right. So at this point, you guys are talking past each other at this point, because he's making a point to say, okay, look, like all the epidemiology part of the paper aside, I found the interventional part, which is the mechanistic part, convincing. So it doesn't seem
right.
Yeah, it seems like that,
what confused me is. Like, and I think this is why we were talking past each other. I was like, there's no way he could, like, care about this. So I was like, but they didn't actually find a causal link in the epidemiological paper. So it's like, why would you care? So that's what was kind of confusing me with that.
Yeah, I think he cleared that up eventually. We'll go
yeah.
If there wasn't the interventional component, totally dismiss it.
Well, no. The problem is if they weren't looking at intake, you have no idea if the erythritol and the elevated erythritol.
No, but they did an interventional study where they fed people erythritol. They gave them erythritol. Read the study. You gotta actually read the study, not just read blogs about the study.
Okay, this is so. Just look at how condescending this is. And by the way, like, if he was right, fine. You could be condescending when you're right. It wouldn't be as bad. He's being misleading about that too. I'm going to pull this up. Sure. Let me share my screen. So his point was that they fed erythritol, but that is actually misleading because the only part in the study. Let me just pull this study up. Let me see if you can see this. Can you see the study?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to go to the section where they did the trial of feeding people erythritol. So there was one part of the study where they fed people erythritol. It was 8 participants. They were given 30 grams of erythritol in a drink, which is, by the way, about twice the value of the average erythritol consumption. And the only purpose of that was to track erythritol blood levels over time. All these things you see about platelet phenotypes and thresholds, such as calcium release, aggregation, p-selectin, those are all inferred from in vitro data or in vivo data that did not
that's
involve
really
humans.
Misleading.
Yeah, that did not involve
making it seem like it's part of the intervention.
Yes, he's making it seem like they fed people erythritol as part of the intervention that had to do with the clotting, but that's not true at all.
Right. So just playing devil's advocate, do you think he may have just seen that chart and being misled by the paper itself?
I mean, I don't care. Like,
sure.
It's just like the point is that what he's saying misleading or not? The answer is yes. Now he could have misled himself. He could be deliberately misleading. I don't know. But the point here for everyone to know is that while being that condescending about not reading a paper carefully enough, he's making statements about the paper implying that they fed participants erythritol as if that intervention was studying these participants and their clotting, or even their clotting in their blood from being fed erythritol when nothing of the sort happened.
Right.
All they did was look at the blood levels, and it was just to see how high they were able to get. And then this inference about, well, they were able to get to the same blood concentration of erythritol as these thrombins, as these calcium release, these various platelet aggregation thresholds. Those are all just those numbers are all coming from things that have nothing to do with feeding people erythritol. Those are coming, and we'll get into those studies, by the way, because it's misleading too. So we're not just going to make the point that mechanistic studies aren't reliable. We're going to get into those studies about why specifically they were particularly unreliable. But we'll keep going. But this was very misleading.
Sure.
And look at how he has his arm around you. Like, just show that. Like, it's so nasty.
Yeah, and like again, it's weird how close he got to me, and it was really uncomfortable, especially when he started flailing his arms around. Like, if I did that to him, security would be called. Like, no joke. It was weird.
I don't know if we're talking about the same paper.
Yeah, there's only one new paper on erythritol. How's it claim?
Right. They only looked at serum concentrations. They didn't measure intake.
They gave them erythritol.
No, they were only looking at serum concentrations.
Did you want me to pause?
Yeah, they gave them erythritol. Yeah, they gave them erythritol and looked at their blood levels, and that was it.
Yeah,
that was it. They didn't look at any clotting in them. All those clotting and stuff came from other studies. Okay.
Yeah, like he was really confusing me in this discussion and making me second guess myself, because I read it and I was like, they never fed erythritol and actually measured clotting. So, yeah.
Dude, no. You want whip out your phone, pull up the study, I'll show you.
One of the larger vegan YouTube channels.
I did not. That's awesome.
Vegan Gains, 300,000. So you guys should have a proper debate on erythritol.
There's really nothing to debate, but I'm happy to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, you know Avi, right? Dr. Avi?
Of course.
Yeah.
I'm a Patreon supporter.
Pause for a second.
Yeah, great, yeah.
So just for the record, he's not a patron of mine. He hasn't been a patron of mine since like January, which is fine, by the way. He doesn't have to be a patron of mine.
Right.
It's not fine to say you're a patron of mine when you're not.
Yeah, that's a little fishy for sure.
That'd be awesome. Well, yeah. I mean, would you be down to set up a debate with Rachel?
About
erythritol? Yeah.
There's nothing to debate, dude.
Oh, I mean,
Okay, well, no, I mean, it just, if you reread the study and still think there's a problem, then we'll talk. Okay, sure. All right. But I think you'll be like, oh shit, there it is. Okay.
Yeah, so then I just took a 5-second break, looked at my phone. Gregor went off somewhere, but I guess he just went to get food, and then when I saw him coming back, that's when I talked to him again.
Erythritol increases plasma levels, and they had an in vitro
Exactly. Right. And the levels that cause clotting in vitro were achievable with dietary doses. So you don't eat dietary doses.
Cause clotting in vitro.
Yeah, clotting in vitro.
So that's the claim. Let's just be clear about causes clotting in vitro. Let's just track the claims, what he's making. Okay.
Yeah.
In the epidemiological study, had any
I
erythritol
freaking told you that.
Erythritol intake is pretty
Now, to be fair,
strong.
I understand. I do understand Dr. Gregor's frustration here, because there's still some crosstalk happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's trying to make the point, listen, I told you this. I grant that part of the study's nonsense, but look at the values with the erythritol and where did the intervention. Yeah.
Again, but he was confusing me because he was drawing this kind of causal link and making it sound like, from the epidemiological data, you could conclude that it was causing clotting. So that's where I was getting a bit confused.
All right, let's see.
So you don't know
if
if there's a causal link. The only thing you have is an in vivo study and an in vitro study.
We've had those epidemiological studies
Right.
for decades.
Right.
And I've been telling people,
Okay, well,
until we
it's
have
very
interventional.
low quality research if you're relying on in vivo and in vitro.
What do you think? I mean, so you're saying that
Well,
the level...
just because you can induce clotting in a petri dish
Right.
or in another animal.
Right.
That doesn't mean that in a human body, just because you have elevated levels, that's going to cause clotting.
But I mean, at that level, it causes it accelerates clotting at that level. So you want that level?
You don't know if it does.
Now notice notice there's a quick slip there. He says at that level it causes, and then he says it accelerates clotting.
Mm,
Those are two
Right.
different claims, and we're going to get into why that matters.
right.
You don't know if it does. No, you know it does in a
vitro.
petri dish.
Right.
Yeah, you
No,
can
I
do
mean, it's not
anything in a
vitro.
petri
I mean, it's
dish.
actually well verified blood clotting model. But you are getting pro-clotting levels of erythritol in your system.
You don't know if it's pro-clotting.
That in vitro study says it's pro-clotting.
You don't know if it's pro-clotting. It's not a randomized trial in a human being. It's just a petri dish.
Pro-clotting studies. I mean, so
Wait. In the epidemiological, you can.
To give people clots?
Well, no, you don't know if it would induce clotting.
Well, you would. I mean, you could. Randomize people.
Yeah.
Let's not do that.
Well, there are people who are
Let's
taking
not do
erythritol.
that.
Erythritol is considered food safe to consume anyway, so it would be able to pass an ethics board just fine.
To randomize after that study came out, I don't think so.
Oh, I think so. And
Yeah.
As someone who's done trials for 4 years, you take something that's FDA approved to say is safe to investigate if it has a given MACE outcome or whatever. Yes, there's not going to be a problem.
Like
At
people are
least not
eating
at
it.
the level of an ethics. At least not at the level of IRB approval.
Yeah, like people are
Right.
eating it, and it's FDA approved. The idea that you're not going to be able to do a randomized trial is crazy.
again, you don't know if the people in the study got those erythritol levels through intake. It could have been produced endogenously.
No, they just gave them.
No, not in the epidemiological study. They only looked at circulating levels.
That's what I'm saying.
No, they only looked at circulating levels, so you don't know if it was through intake,
Dude,
and you don't know if
quoting my video.
you don't know if the event risk, the increased events, was due to the erythritol. You're talking about people who are
100%.
you were talking about people who were overweight, had heart disease, diabetic.
Dude, you're quoting from my video.
You're
trashing
talking-
epidemiology. What are you talking about?
Then you're just making assumptions based on the in vitro study and the in vivo
Damn
experience.
right I am, of course.
That's crazy.
And now you two finally get on the same page.
Yeah.
About what
Yeah.
you're So finally, you're not talking past each other. Right? You guys are understanding each other now.
Okay, you can induce clotting with plenty of different things and see weird things happen in a petri dish. Doesn't mean you're going to actually.
It's not like they tripped.
No. Okay, no. Okay, tell me if erythritol was so dangerous and induced clotting like this, how has this never been detected before? It would have been detected before. You're talking about an extremely sick. You're talking about an extremely sick population. You don't even know their levels of intake of erythritol.
You're arguing against someone who.
My point is, there's no way to know if it's causal. You have no way to know if there's a causal relationship.
Of course.
You can't establish that with in vitro and in vivo experiments either.
Of course. But look,
Then why are you making the recommendation?
precautionary principle, dude.
Oh, okay, there's really no reason to be precautionary. When you're talking about extremely sick populations,
Oh, what? Extremely sick populations.
the people in that study were diabetic, had heart disease, overweight, they were
That's
extremely
my
sick.
video.
They
That's
were
my
extremely
video.
sick. I don't know how you can make the link between erythritol and those deaths when you're talking about a sick population.
100% didn't, and I have a video exactly saying
Okay,
the opposite of what you just
so your
attributed to me.
recommendation is entirely based on the in vitro and in vivo experiments?
Yes.
Okay, well, fair enough. Well, good talking to you.
Yeah. I was like flabbergasted at that point because I would have assumed he would have been concerned about erythritol intake due to the associations with those deaths, but he's saying he completely ignored that, and it was entirely due to the clotting experiments.
Yeah. Now at that point, there's two responses to make, and then there's three. Two are broad, and one is context specific. So we'll make the two broad points first. First off, we have a lot of background data about the reliability of those types of studies, mechanistic studies in general. in terms of their likelihood to translate to clinical success, to an outcome. And it's really a flip of the coin, whether it's the effect size goes in your favor, the effect size doesn't go in your favor, or the effect size goes in the opposite direction. And so there really isn't much of a reason to believe it's helpful or harmful based on mechanistic data alone. That's point one. Point two is, with that standard, you can basically justify any precautionary principle that you'd like. There's enough mechanistic data out there. You could probably find a mechanistic study. I haven't looked, but I'm sure someone out there can dig up a mechanistic study suggesting that there's some problem with apple consumption, or anything for that matter.
Well, I've seen in vitro experiments where soy accelerated cancer cell growth.
Or those kind of goitrogen stuff about thyroid, and all those kind of nonsense about soy. There's you could come to anti-vegan conclusions based on you could even have logically contradictory positions.
Yeah, and this is what Paul Saladino does regularly, by the way.
Oh yeah. So that's one. But then those were the broad points to make about just making precautionary recommendations based on mechanistic data alone. But let's actually get into the specifics of the mechanistic studies that he's relying on, and just show just how poor it is to and misleading the characterization is. Right. So these were the two studies that he's talking about, and I'll read it really quick. So erythritol and thrombosis potential in human whole blood and in vivo. We further examined the effect of erythritol on platelet adhesion, the initial step in clot formation, in human whole blood under physiological shear conditions using a microfluidics device. Erythritol elicited significant enhancement in the rate of collagen-dependent, that's important, platelet adhesion and thrombosis formation. The impact of erythritol on in vivo thrombosis potential, so this is a second experiment, was further examined in mice, this is a mouse model, by monitoring the rate of clot formation in the time to cessation of blood flow using a iron trichloride induced carotid artery injury model. So this is basically taking a chemical that induces injury in the artery. It broadly injures the artery, and it broadly induces clot formation. Notably, when compared to either saline or 1,5-AHG, that's some type of sugar, or some type of carbohydrate, I believe. I'd have to look that up. But in any case, it should have a similar effect and it does have a similar effect as the vehicle. Elevation of circulating erythritol levels elicited marked enhancement in the rate of thrombus formation and a significant reduction in the time cessation of blood flow following arterial injury. And here are the results. You can see that erythritol, in the first experiment, erythritol, the 45 micromolar pretreated blood was found to have a faster clotting time, where it was bound to the collagen containing microfluidics device, and this was labeled, as you can see here. And so in the vehicle, you see less clotting. Similarly, in the in vivo model, you see that there was a shorter time by about 250 seconds for total cessation of blood flow, with the model in which there was a broad diffuse damage to the artery. Okay. What is the misleading thing here? Well, the misleading thing here is what these experiments are made out to sound. And I'll go back on camera now. These experiments are made out to be like, well, we put erythritol in the blood and clots have formed. And that's just not true. There was no clot induced purely by erythritol. What they did was they set up a situation in which clots would always be induced, which was they exposed platelets to collagen, either with a microfluidics device, which was collagen coated, or by damaging an artery in vivo, which will expose, in the case of arteries, I believe it's type 3 collagen. In the case of the microfluidics device, it's type 1 collagen. In the case of arteries, you may get some type 3 collagen in there as well. But in any case, when you expose collagen to platelets, platelets are supposed to form clots. That's how you avoid bleeding out when you get cut.
Okay, so it's basically simulating a situation where, like, you would be cut or like injured.
It's simulating
in
a
some way
situation
where
of
skin would break
vascular
open.
injury. Yes,
Right. Yeah.
It's and it's not some small vascular. It's these are. One was an extreme vascular injury that would that
It'd
even
kill you
without
anyway,
erythritol,
basically.
you get
Yeah.
full cessation of blood flow in the carotid.
Right.
And then another one is just taking straight up collagen-coated microfluidics devices and exposing them to platelets. And surprise, surprise, clotting happened where it was supposed to happen, which
Right.
is where the exposed collagen was. And yes, it happened faster so clotting happened faster in the erythritol-treated blood. But the point there is, it only happened where it was exposed to collagen. It's not like you had erythritol pre-treated blood with a non-damaged endothelium or not exuberantly damaged endothelium, and you just had spontaneous clot formation. That never happened. That's never been shown. Not in vitro, not in vivo, not epidemiological, not anywhere. What happened was you created a situation where even sugar water would, even if you just, instead of erythritol injected sugar water, you'd get a clot. Where the clot's supposed to be, it's just erythritol made the clot happen faster. What can we infer from that? Not much.
Nothing, really.
Because if you think about it, you can just as easily make the case that, I mean, and one of the reasons why is that there's no real evidence that clotting happened where it wasn't supposed to. It didn't, like, the clot didn't spread. If you look at the experiment, it didn't spread past the level of the microfluidics devices all over and started happening all over the blood. It didn't spread past the level of the carotid, carotids where it was injured. It just happened. It just clotted faster by 250 seconds. So you could just as easily make the case that someone who has a high level of erythritol is just going to clot where they're supposed to clot better. It's not necessarily going to be the case that they're going to be clotting spontaneously and throwing clots in there and stroking out or anything.
Right. So just for people who might have had trouble understanding that, basically in those experiments, they induced clotting with different devices where clots were going to form anyway. It wasn't the erythritol that induced clotting. So they essentially either triggered clotting using some device or injury, and the erythritol just made those clots form faster.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Notice that it didn't say that the clots formed more exuberantly to the point where the volume of the clot overtook where it was supposed to be, being that at the level of the collagen. Notice how it didn't say any of that. It was just a time-based endpoint. I mean, so clotting happened faster in a context where you're supposed to clot.
Right.
Wow. That's what the mechanistic study showed.
Yeah, so, like, and again, just to reiterate, the mechanistic data didn't suggest that erythritol would cause a thrombocyte to form and it would, like, travel up to your, like, brain and cause, you know, a stroke or anything.
Yeah, or at least, I mean, look, you can always there's always a possibility that when you have a normal injury, you can clot and the clot can travel. Like, that's always going to, it's just, but you don't get to the point where it's any more likely or less likely to happen just by saying the clot forms to completion at a faster rate when the clot would have formed to completion anyway.
Right.
And moreover, the way the data is presented isn't even like that. The way the data is presented is as if, well, we gave erythritol in vitro, and then clots just formed.
Right.
It was thrombotic. No, that's completely misleading.
Yeah, and again, if that were the case, if erythritol could actually do that, we would have research probably already showing erythritol is linked with clotting and, like, heart attacks or strokes or something, if it was that pro-clotting.
Yeah, and just to put this all in second, even if it did show that, it would still have the problem of being mechanistic data and completely unreliable.
Exactly.
It's just that even at that level, that's not what it showed.
Right. Yeah. So the mechanistic data is just completely, utterly, like, you cannot take anything from it, really.
And so I say to
Yeah.
Dr. Greger, who so graciously put his arm around you and said, read the paper. I say to Dr. Greger, please, read the paper.
Yes. All right. Well, is that all you wanted to share?
Yeah, that's the main thing I have to say.
Okay. Well, great. Thanks for coming on. I'll be sure to clip this and re-upload it so everybody can see. But thanks for coming on, man. All right,
Sure.
great.
All right, take care.
Take care.